Hello, everybody, and welcome to another Nightly Read Aloud with Dr. Ivey. Today is Monday. It is Memorial Day, May the 25th, 2020. Tonight marks our 51st Nightly Read Aloud during school closure. My name is Trevor Ivey, and I am a proud educator here in Sumter County, South Carolina. And like so many of my educator colleagues right here in my very own community, across the state, the nation, and even the world are being asked to step up and out of their comfort zone to completely redesign teaching and learning experiences to ensure that our children remain meaningfully engaged during this very challenging time when schools are closed, children are home, but learning must continue. And to that end, I have dedicated myself to a nightly read aloud each school night at 8 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I share recorded read aloud on all of my social media channels on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And like I said earlier, tonight marks our 51st nightly read aloud during school closure. And even though schools locally here in the Sumter area and many across the state and nation are closed for Memorial Day, I wanted to continue along with our nightly read alouds. So for night 51, I have selected a book titled The Library Dragon. The Library Dragon is both authored and illustrated by Carmen Agradidi. Let's find out what The Library Dragon is all about. Sunrise Elementary School had a big problem. The new librarian, Miss Lottie Scales, was a real dragon. You see the smoke from the dragon? I wonder if they're implying she's a real dragon. Miss Lottie Scales was hired to guard the school library. And let me tell you this, she took her job really seriously. Hundreds of new clean books replaced the old smudged ones. And these shining gems neatly lined the shelves of her library lair in perfect order. Number 398.2s in the 500s, and absolutely no fiction books were allowed among the biographies. Looks like a real dragon to me. She kept a fiery eye out to make sure no one removed any of the books away from the shelves. You see, boys and girls, her motto was a place for everything, and that's where it stays. The very thought of sticky little fingers touching and clutching, pawing and clawing, smearing and tearing her precious books just made her hot underneath the collar. So Miss Scales thought that the way some books spread an unfounded fear of dragons was positively inflammatory. Books that depict cruelty to dragons should never have been published in the first place. She got so fired up about this that she didn't just discard the books she didn't like. She incinerated them in big hot flames. And the kids, they watched in awe. "Well, that settles it," said Albert Hoops. "Where there's smoke, there's fire. And that Miss Scales is a real dragon, you see?" Not surprisingly, the kids at Sunrise Elementary School began to dread Library Day. It wasn't long before the teachers stopped sending the children to the library. They kept coming back singed. First, the principal tried to reason with Miss Scales, but his plan backfired. Instead of cooling her down, he just fanned the flames even higher and higher. And finally, "Don't forget who does the hiring, Miss Scales," sputtered the principal. "Oh, really? And who does the firing?" asked Miss Scales with a glare and a flare that caught his tie on fire. "Now you just cut that out," said the principal as he waved the smoke out of his face. "No smoking in the library," Miss Lottie Scales said dryly. The principal was fuming. The teachers were incensed, and worst of all, the children had missed reading and story time for weeks, and their grades were going up in smoke. So the teachers formed a delegation, and after a trip to the cafeteria kitchen to fortify themselves, they decided to pay a visit to the library to see Miss Scales. Miss Lottie Scales smoldered as she listened to sweet Miss Lemon, the kindergarten teacher. And most importantly, Miss Scales, dear, the children miss story time. Story time, schmory time, blew Miss Lottie Scales with a bunch of smoke. Why, if I let the children touch these books with their gooey fingers and snotty noses, this library wouldn't last a week. And she stared so furiously at the teachers that they threw down their weapons and clanged out, all except for Miss Lemon, that is. You know, Miss Scales, we all love the books just as much as you do. But the library belongs to the children. Good night, Miss Lemon. You slay me, cracked Miss Scales. Why, the idea of story time is simply medieval. Are the teachers convincing Miss Scales to change her ways? It doesn't look like it. Let's continue to read along and find out what happens next. And just as usual, the dragon always had the last word. Then Miss Lemon, she is just a real spitfire, chuckled Miss Scales, but she had spewed so much smoke and fire at sweet Miss Lemon that she had to lie down to take a nap. Miss Lemon was really tired. She was really dragging. In fact, she was burned out. And this passed on to the dragon. Being a library dragon can be such a lonely job, she mumbled sadly to herself as she heaved a mighty sigh and closed her scaly lids. It was at that very moment that Molly Brickmeyer accidentally wandered into the library. Uh-oh, what's Molly going to do? Molly was on a quest. She had lost her glasses and she couldn't see a thing without them unless it was right underneath her nose. She stumbled into a bookshelf and a book fell onto her lap. She never saw the sign that read, "Do not touch the books, for display only." It was way over her head, so she held this one right under her nose and began to read out loud. First, a class of second graders in line for the water fountain heard her and tiptoed into the library to listen. Then came the fourth graders, outside playing kickball. They heard a story being read aloud and crowded around the windows. "Speak up," someone said. Molly Brickmeyer spoke up, all right. Word of story time in the library spread like wildfire at Sunrise Elementary School. Everyone was listening, even the library dragon, and her ears were burning. Slowly, Miss Lottie Scales rose up from behind a bookshelf and looked at the boys and girls huddled all around Molly. She'd never seen anything quite like it. The children looked like they belonged to her. "I love you, Snuff," Molly read on and on as the children quietly listened. "Give me that book, Molly Brickmeyer," roared Miss Scales. Molly held the book cheerfully toward the scaly blur. Miss Lottie Scales took the book and eyed it suspiciously as it hung from her claw. First, she sniffed it. Then she checked the spine for cracks. Then she checked each page for stains and smudges. Finally, Miss Scales looked around at the children and cleared the smoke from her throat. "Now, where were we? Why, yes, I love you, Snuff." At first, the children were just too nervous to listen. But when Molly Brickmeyer climbed up onto Miss Lottie Scales' lap and didn't get scorched, they relaxed. "You're warm," said to the dragon. "Don't interrupt," Miss Scales crackled. Everyone was listening so intently that they almost missed it. As she read, Miss Lottie Scales began to fall on the linoleum floor with the clickety-clack, clickety-clack. Another clickety-clack, until all that was left was Miss Lottie, the librarian and storyteller, sitting on a mountain of yellow, green, and purple scales with Molly Brickmeyer, dragon slayer extraordinaire, on her lap. The rest of the children warmed up to Miss Lottie right away. The changes in Miss Lottie's new kid-friendly library were hard to miss, and not surprisingly, the kids at Sunrise Elementary School began to love Library Day. Miss Lottie's transformation, however, was not entirely complete. But then, every librarian needs to be a little bit of a dragon, or else who would guard the books? What a very funny book. And boys and girls, this just reminds me of the important role our librarians in the schools play in the teaching and learning process. And you know, librarians are actually teachers. Many of them actually were former teachers before they became the school librarian. And they take their job very seriously, just as it was portrayed in this book. They, in a sense, have to guard the books in the library. And so you will, as I know you know, encounter rules and procedures in the library that will protect the books. And in this book, at Sunrise Elementary, the librarian, who really is not a dragon, has this deep love of books. And her name is Miss Lottie Scales. And she's perfect for this job because who can guard the books in a library better than a real dragon? In fact, the book tells us some very key phrases that help us to relate to the sense of a dragon. Keeping a fiery eye out to make sure that no one removed the books from the shelves, and making sure to check the books for smearing, tearing, pawing, and clawing. And even so, when children touched the books, that it made her hot underneath the collar. And so what happened in this book, the teacher signed and scorched, they formed a delegation, but not even a teacher from kindergarten, Miss Lemon, could convince Miss Lottie Scales that the library truly belongs to the children. But fortunately, there is this student named, you remember her name? Molly Brickmeyer, who stumbles into the library one day and begins to read a book out loud. And it is her reading these books that beckon all of the other children to come into the library and brings them face to face with Miss Lottie Scales, the library dragon. And so in this book, we learn of the important role that librarians play. I have had the honor and good fortune to work alongside with very passionate librarians at the schools that I have been able to work at. And I know that they take their job seriously. And so it is this time of year that they take it really seriously, boys and girls, because they have to make sure that they do guard against all of the books in the library, to make sure that they have accounted for all of the books in their collection at the school. So just a friendly reminder that if you have not checked your room, your book bag for any library books that you may still have in your possession, make sure to do so at some point in the next couple of days, so that if you do have any, that you can make sure that they get back to the school, not only so that you are not charged for any missing library books or other materials that belong to the school, but more importantly, that the librarian can continue to share his or her love of reading with future children at the school. So make sure to check those rooms and those book bags. Make sure to check underneath your bed and in all of the other spaces that you may have a library book, because you don't want to miss out on making sure that you bring a smile to your school librarian space to make sure that all of those books have been accounted for. So I hope you enjoyed tonight's read along for night number 51 of school closure. It is our 11th week that we have been reading these books aloud, and The Library Dragon was certainly another great addition. So again, happy Memorial Day. Boys and girls, if you did not know, Memorial Day is an annual day that is set aside for us to remember, that's right, to remember the honor and sacrifice that so many of our men and women in uniform before us have actually made to keep the freedoms that we enjoy so much alive, and so that they can protect them. And they paid the ultimate sacrifice, and that is why we have this day called Memorial Day, is to remember those that have paid the ultimate sacrifice. And so I salute those who continue to serve in uniform, while also remembering the memory of those that have paid that ultimate sacrifice. And so happy Memorial Day to everyone out there. Before you go, boys and girls, and brush your teeth, wash your hands, and get into the bed, let's take a moment to engage in our nightly reflection with our 4 questions. Starting with question number 1. What was your most favorite thing about today? Take a moment to share with your parent, your older or younger sibling, or fuzzy friend, or if no one else is around you, take a moment to share with yourself out loud. What was your most favorite part about today? Question number 2. What was your least favorite part about today? Question number 3. If you could go back and change one thing about today, what would you change? And question number 4, what is one thing that you hope is going to happen tomorrow? Well, boys and girls, that does it. Thank you for tuning in for another nightly Read Aloud with Dr. Ivey during school closure. Remember, if no one has told you that they love you today, if no one has told you that they care about you today, Dr. Ivey is here to tell you that he loves you and cares about you so very much. Have a good night, everyone, and we'll see you tomorrow for our next nightly Read Aloud. Good night.